February of 2020, then 95-year-old Victoria resident Lorne Frame received some special mail from the French embassy in Ottawa. COVID prevented French officials from traveling to make an in-person presentation to Lorne. Inside the package was the National Order of the Legion of Honor from France. Established in 1802 by Napoleon Bonaparte, the honor remains France's highest decoration. The story of how Ottawa-born Lorne Frame came to receive recognition from France is worthy of a book, and in fact, part of his adventure was chronicled in a book titled A House Near Paris, the place where Lorne, a Lancaster bomber pilot, and some of the crew of his downed plane were sheltered for 7 weeks by a former American Hollywood actress. My name is Kim Hesketh, a volunteer at the BC Aviation Museum, and I had the privilege of interviewing Lorne beside the fuselage and one of 4 engines of a Lancaster under restoration at the museum. This is part of Lorne Frame's amazing story. Lorne, pleasure to talk with you today. I want to start off with why you wanted to become a pilot.
I guess, I was building model airplanes and this and that, and I wanted to learn to fly. And I thought of all kinds of things I might be doing, and I investigated all the flying schools in the U.S., and I said, well, I'm not going to be able to afford to do that. And one thing after another, and I thought, well, I could join the Air Force. The RAF was recruiting in those days, and they teach you to fly, give you a 7-year commission, and you had to, that was the terms, and I said, well, maybe I'll do that.
So you were originally trained as a single-engine pilot, but you were sent overseas in 1943 and ended up as part of the 419 Bomber Squadron, I understand, also known as the Moose Squadron, where you flew Lancaster bombers. So how did you go from single engine to multiple engine aircraft like a Lancaster?
Well, it was easy. I was given a weekend pass and I went up to Scotland to visit relatives I had never met. And when I got to Scotland, there was a telegram waiting for me to return to Bournemouth, which is where the Air Force was based, and for posting. I spent the day in Scotland, went back over on the overnight train, reported the next morning. They said, you're too late, you missed your posting. And that would have been a posting to a single engine school, and I wound up in Bomber Command.
Right. So the Lancaster, of course, was one of the largest Allied bombers in the Second World War. And I believe the ones that you flew, I think it was the Mark 10, were built in Canada. Yeah. What was it like to fly?
I couldn't describe it. It was just indescribably beautiful to fly. It didn't handle like a heavy 4-engine machine at all. It was just a dream to fly. It was enjoyable.
Talk about July 5th, 1944, when you were on your 13th mission, which was a nighttime raid, and after dropping your bomb load, your plane was attacked by a German fighter south of Paris. So what were your thoughts when you realized that your aircraft was going down?
My thought was to try to keep it under control. 2 port engines were on fire. We used the fire extinguishers, got one engine fire out, but the other kept going. And then the main fuel tank on the port side had a hole in it, and it was on fire. And we were slowly turning to port, even though I was in a full starboard position, and we were losing altitude. So I was hoping that we might be able to get back to our own lines. But there was no question that when the aircraft was doing what it wanted to do, and so we got out.
So you ordered the crew to bail out at that point, and you were the last one out. I understand your recollection was that you bailed out at about 1,200 feet, which would be pretty risky.
Yes. When I bailed out, I wasn't sure that I'd be able to get out because I'm still holding on to the controls. As I say, everything's in the starboard position. We're going left. And so I said, well, I've got to get out of here. As soon as I let go, I expected the aircraft to just, but wasn't to think about it. Just had to get out in a hell of a hurry. And when I did, I saw trees. We were on the edge of the forest. And I thought, okay, I'm going to land in among these trees. So in preparation for that, I crossed my legs, put my arms over my head, bang! I'm sitting on the ground. And I couldn't figure it out. I looked up, and there was a huge opening in this canopy of trees, and I had come through that. And I thought, my God, somebody's looking after me.
You were close to a village called Barbizon, and I understand that you were actually had taken refuge in a tree and were discovered by someone.
Heard voices, climbed a tree to see what the lay of the land was like, and then happened to look down here, the old geezer looking up at me. So I thought, my God, my idea at that point before that happened was that I was 250 miles or so in enemy territory. I would sleep by day and walk by night and maybe try and head that way. And what here is, this guy's discovered me the first the first day. I came down out of the tree and talked to him. I wanted to know where I was. I had a very rough idea where I was, but and I had already said bonjour, monsieur, in French, and he bonjour. He said, vous êtes allemand? I said, no, I'm not Canadian. And he blinked, and so I said, RAF, and it didn't ring a bell. So I said, je suis American. American? And he got excited, and I pulled out a map. He looked at me, and he looked at that, and he looked at me, and this guy had probably never seen a map before. So finally, he said he'd go and get somebody who could speak English. So I said, okay, and I watched him disappear. So I waited, I don't know, half an hour or more. And then I saw him and a young girl walking from the village to where I was. So she came running to me, threw her arms around me and gave me a kiss and talked to me in Yorkshire. So a Yorkshire girl who had married a Frenchman before the war. So she said she was going to lead me into the village, and I was to follow her by 50 yards or so, and if anything happened, I'd be on my own. So where she went, I followed, and we got onto into one of the main streets of the village, and we were passing a house. The woman stepped out, greeted this woman I was following. So they started talking, and I'm getting closer and closer to them. And as I was passing them, They said, in here, in here. I popped through the open door. The two women said goodbye to each other.
This is where you met Drew Tartier,
Yes.
who has an amazing story herself. Can you tell us how an American woman got to be living in a house near Paris and welcoming you in?
Well, she was an actress, first of all, and had married a French actor when they were both playing on the stage in London. When the war broke out, they moved to Paris, and he joined the army, the French army, and was subsequently killed in North Africa.
So what did you admire the most about her?
She was certainly someone who could take care of herself. She, when shortly after the war was declared, she was picked up with a lot of other Americans in France and in a concentration camp for a short while. She eventually was released from the whatever prison she was in, and spent the rest of the time living in Barbizon.
You are, I believe, joined by two other members of your crew?
There were my navigator and my flight engineer wound up in the same house that I was in, and then a pilot and a navigator of another crew from our squadron whom we had never met. They were knocked down on their very first trip.
You were living in the midst of an occupying enemy force. Did you or any of your rescuers have any close calls?
The closest was one day, one night, when the Germans were retreating and they occupied virtually all of Barbizon except for a few houses. Ours was one of them. But the street was full of German army.
Did you have an escape plan?
Sure. We were going to go out the back door and run.
Now, you were concealed for about 7 weeks until the area was liberated by American forces.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about the day of that liberation?
Well, first of all, we got word that some Americans had entered the town, and the town people were running up the street to meet these fellows. It was a lieutenant and his sergeant in a jeep. When this happened, Drew got our uniforms out, which had been stored away. We all got into our Air Force uniforms, went out to greet this sergeant, lieutenant, and we said to him, "Where the hell you guys been? We've been here for 7 weeks." And so we all had dinner together that night.
Lorne, you were presented with one of the highest honors of France, the Legion of Honor, for your role in the liberation of France and, I would say, Europe. So how do you feel about the honor and the contribution you made as a Canadian to the war effort?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. I've welcomed it, of course, but that's about as far as it's gone with me. I had medals that were presented during the war that arrived by postal in the late 40s in Ottawa, and they were still in the little boxes that they came in, and for years they never came out of the boxes. And then my wife a few years ago decided this was nonsense, and she had them mounted on a on a site, and they've been hanging on the wall ever since. I guess I just tried to put all those warriors and things behind me and tried to forget about them.
Well, thank you for your contribution to the war effort, and congratulations.
Thank you.